Hello, hello. Thanks for being here, everyone. We're going to get going in just a couple minutes. All right. Hello, everyone. We're still waiting on a few people, so I'm not going to keep you waiting for too much longer, but we are going to give it just a minute or two before we get going on the essay writing. I'm excited you are all here, and like I said, we'll start in just a second once everyone has joined us. All right, we are going to go ahead and get started. And we're going to have a few more people who are going to filter in as we get going, as you all can probably hear the beeps on my end. But we're going to go ahead, get going, talk about the essay. And if anyone comes late, we will get them caught up. So we are here for the essay writing workshop. If anyone meant to be somewhere else, we are still happy to have you here, but you are more than welcome to go where you meant to be. But yeah, a couple things before we get started. Off the top, this session is being recorded and we'll make the recording available to everyone here after the fact. So don't worry about like vigorously taking notes, trying to keep up with how I talk. I know I go a little fast sometimes, but just know that you're going to have a recording of this that you'll be able to refer back to at any point. A little bit about myself and what my role is in the application process and when I'm the person leading this workshop. My name is Robert Stolzberg. I'm an admissions counselor at Western. If any of you were at the Q&A earlier this afternoon, you'll remember me from that, for those of you who don't know, I'm specifically the admissions counselor for Alaska, Oregon, and Southwest Washington. We'll talk a little bit later on how you can get in touch with the admissions counselor from your area if you're not from one of those three places. What's important to know about my role in the admissions process at Western is that when you apply to Western, I'm one of the people who will be reviewing your application and, more importantly, what we're doing here, reviewing your essay. I'm also on the committees that make admissions and scholarship decisions through the admissions process. Which I let you know, just so that you all know, like, when I'm talking about what we look for in an application, what makes a strong application, that's where I'm coming from as one of the people reviewing the applications. Also Western graduate myself. I attended Western from 2010 through 2014. I double majored in Spanish and linguistics, minored in teaching English as a second language. I spent a couple of years living in Spain, teaching English, and I've been working in admissions at Western for about 4 years now. And originally from Fairbanks, Alaska. So if anyone's from Alaska, or even from Fairbanks or the interior, feel free to let me know. We've got a chat here in the Zoom call. Y'all are familiar with Zoom at this point. So definitely feel free to share like any questions or thoughts or anything that you have in there. I'll be checking that periodically throughout our session here. We've got about an hour, so there's going to be plenty of time to get to questions and things like that. But I don't mind if you all interrupt me with your questions over the course of this. I actually prefer that to holding them on and all having questions at the same time at the end. So yeah, we're gonna go over the essay. We're gonna talk about what makes a strong application essay, why it is that we as a university require an essay, and how you can, get into writing an essay. And we'll do a little bit of a sort of brainstorm about what types of essays we can write. So just going ahead into the essay, and this really is for the application process in general. When we talk about like what we look for, we do what's called a holistic application review, which means that we consider academic and non-academic factors equally when reviewing your application for admission and for scholarships. So very broadly speaking, with the application process, the four main things that we're looking for are academic performance, contributions to community achievements, which is a very broad category, and diverse experiences. But rather than dwelling on those for too long, I want to get into how you can actually express those in your essay. And before we talk about the content of the essay and like what topics you should write about, I think it's important to talk about some small important details. And some of you might see these and roll your eyes and say like, well, oh yeah, that's obvious. Like, of course I should spell things right, et cetera, et cetera. But we see a surprising amount of essays every year that don't necessarily have that same attention to detail to them. So something I like to put in folks' heads. I know a few people have shown up since we started talking. Just to catch you up real quick, my name is Robert. I'm an admissions counselor at Western. I'm one of the people who will be reviewing your essay when you apply to Western, and we're here to talk about how to write a strong essay. So, small important details. This is stuff that's going to be important, like no matter if it's your essay for Western or if you're writing essays for other schools as well. A lot of you are going to be applying for multiple universities. We're not like offended by that fact or feeling hurt about it or anything, but no matter who you're writing an essay for, like a lot of what I talk about in this presentation is going to be like specific to Western and what we look for. This page in particular is like good practices for no matter where you're writing an essay for. So the very like simple basic stuff, like spell check it, right? And not just for like misspellings, but also like there, two, things like that. And I also have the bullet on there, like make sure you put the right name of the school on there. A lot of students will use the same essay for multiple college applications. That's totally fine to do as long as it addresses what each specific university is looking for in an essay, because that is going to vary among universities. But we get essays every year that are like really good essays and really insightful, and then they end with, and that's why I want to attend the university, or that's why I want to attend Washington State University. So just double check that. If you're like copy pasting an essay from one application to another, make sure you're doing it in a way that's like applicable for the school that you are sending it to. To that note of proofreading, spell checking, things like that, if you look at our application, some of you may have seen it, some of you may not have gotten that far at this point because we are still early in the application cycle. The space in our application where you put the essay is just a box that you can write text in. Really want to discourage you from like writing your essay in that box. You're gonna be a lot better off writing the essay in Word or in Google Docs or wherever, and then just copy it. When it's done, it's going to be a lot easier for you to read and review and revise if you're not putting it straight in that box. Speaking of revision as well, really want to encourage you all to not be the only person who reads your essay, before you submit it to us. Part of that is for reasons of like spell checking and grammar and clarity and like that really basic mechanical stuff that can help having someone else see. But another reason why it's really important to have somebody else read your essay before you submit it to us is that this goes beyond just college essays. Like as a writer, whenever you putting words to paper, it can be easy to fall into a trap of like, hey, this makes sense in my head, but it might not necessarily make sense to the reader. And that as a writer is a really hard thing to figure out. Because like, you know what you mean when you write something, like, you know what's going on in your head, you know what your intention is when you put words to paper. So I encourage you to, depending the relationship you have with your parents, your teachers, close friends, siblings, your school counselors, lots of people are good options to like help read and review and say like, hey, this makes sense, or like, hey, this is super unclear. And you might not have noticed that because you were the person who wrote it. So yeah, it doesn't matter if it's, if it's a teacher, a family member, friend, anything like that. But I do want to really encourage you all to not be the only person who reads your essay. So that's some small important details. And let's get to the actual essay prompt. You can see we have 3 different essay prompts. You don't have to respond to all 3 of these. You only have to write 1 essay for Western. As you can see, they're pretty general here, right? So essay number 1, like describe any activities you're involved with related to diversity or multiculturalism in your community. Essay 2, share a meaningful experience and how this has shaped your preparation for college. Or the most popular one, essay 3, topic of your choice. If you've written another essay, if you have something else you'd like to talk about that doesn't fit into these like pre-prescribed prompts, you can write your essay for your Western application about anything you want to. We are very, very flexible about not making you beholden to answering a specific prompt. We really look at the essay as like your space to express what's important to you and like what matters to you. And we don't want to like paint you into a corner by making you answer a particular prompt if that's not the right essay for you. And I think that can be really cool and empowering for a lot of students when we say like, hey, you can write your college essay about anything you want to. At the same time, it's like kind of a big thing to put on someone of me saying like, hey, you guys can write your college essay about literally whatever you want. Kind of understandably is going to lead to the question like, well, what should I write my college essay about? And that is kind of the biggest thing that I want to get to in this presentation is what should you write your college essay about? It's going to look different for all of you, and we'll go into the reasons why a little bit. But regardless of what you choose to write your essay about, regardless of which prompt you answer, what the actual subject material is, I have 2 super secret insider essay tips from the person reviewing your essay that we are definitely looking for. We have a question in the chat from Savannah. Does the topic you choose impact whether or not you get admitted? It does not. We give you those like pre-written topics, in order for you to be able to have like a little inspiration for getting started. But I really mean it when I say it's less important to us the topic you choose to write about, and more important that it is, the thing that you're passionate about or the story that, for you is important to tell about yourself. So the topic that you choose to write about does not impact your ability to get admitted. The quality of your essay is going to have an impact on if you get admitted. Is going to have an impact on scholarships, but not so specific as which prompt you choose. Question from Julia: how personal is too personal? I love that question. I love when that comes up. There's nothing that is too personal on our end. We get essays about really hard things, about traumas that students have experienced. We get essays about the passing of family members, things like that. The extent of like what is too personal is just what you are comfortable with sharing. But if you are writing your essay about something that's personal or something that's like a little heavy, don't at all worry about like it being too much for us. And I'll talk a little bit later on in the presentation about some strategies for writing an essay about something that's personal or about something that's heavy. So we'll go into a little bit greater detail there in a few minutes here. But yeah, there's nothing that's too personal. There's nothing that's too much information. It's just a matter of what you're comfortable with. If you write an essay that is like very personal and hard for me to read, like I will read it and then like go walk a lap around the block, and then be good to continue with your application. So those are great questions. Please feel free to keep those coming. So super secret essay insider tips that all of your essays should hit. Tip number one is that a good essay should be personal. Like I mentioned before, like we really want to get to know you. We're gonna have your grades. We're gonna see what classes you're taking. Test scores are optional this year. For some of you, we're gonna have test scores. So we want to know something in the essay that's like not reflected in that material that you'll have already submitted. And that goes to like, you're going to submit an activities list, right? So you don't need to recap what's on the activities list in your essay. But yeah, we want it to be personal. Every year we get students who submit things like research papers or a biography of someone else or a work of fiction that are like well written and good, but not appropriate for what we're looking for in terms of an application essay, because we're not learning something like about you as a person. We have a question. I want to write about moving overseas, but it says on my transcript that I switched schools freshman year. Is that okay? Yeah, that's totally fine. Like, we're going to see on your transcript that you went to a different school, but you telling us about the experience in that application, like that doesn't show up on your transcript, how it made you feel, what impacted you, how it prepared you for college. None of that shows up on the transcript. So it's okay for something that's on your transcript to be featured in your essay. We just want you to go like next level and say like, this is why this was an important experience. So yeah, that is a great thing to write your essay about. Thank you for the question, Savannah. Okay, so use your voice. Tell us something about you. We're not looking for a research paper. Oftentimes, students in high school are told in English class that like it's not appropriate or it's not professional or it's not academic to write in the first person and talk about like what you think and feel. And for many types of academic writing, that's not appropriate. But in this instance, even though this is like a tangentially academic, tangentially formal piece of writing, like we are really looking for it to be personal. So it's encouraged, write in the first person, tell us how you think, tell us how you feel. The other thing about it being personal is like it doesn't have to be exclusively about you. You can write your essay about your best friend or about your sports team or about your D&D group. But just make sure that like that relates back to you, right? So example of like, if you write your essay about your dog, I would want it to look a little something like, I have a dog, his name is Rover, these are the responsibilities that I have as a pet owner, and like, because I have a dog and I love him so much, I know I want to be a vet, and that's why I want to go to college, right? So you're telling us about your dog, but also through your dog, you're telling us something meaningful about you in the context of like college, which is what you're writing this essay for. If you write an essay about your dog and it sounds something like, I have a dog, his name is Rover, he likes to play fetch, he's a very, very, very good boy, I will still enjoy reading that essay, but it's not a good essay for your college application because you haven't told us something meaningful about you. So I hope that like distinction makes sense. You extrapolate that onto sports, TV, food, like you can write about all of those things, just make sure that it relates back to you personally. So that is super secret insider essay tip number one. Essay should be personal. Super secret essay insider tip number two is that your essay should in some way answer the question, what about me will make me successful at Western? The whole reason that universities make you go through this college application process and send in your grades and your classes and your test scores and your activities and your essays is that we across the board are all looking for students who are going to come to our universities and be successful. And success both in and out of the classroom. It doesn't just have to be academic, right? So your essay should address that in some way. It doesn't have to be as explicit and direct as saying like, I will be successful at Western because XYZ, right? But demonstrate that. Like you don't have to tell, but you can show it in your essay. And so that's the part of the essay that's like gonna look really different for each one of you because you're all bringing something different to the table in terms of what's gonna make you successful here. So like maybe you have some really impressive academic accolade and like that can be a great thing to write your essay about. Maybe you're really involved in your community in a way that's like very meaningful to you. And that's something that you're gonna carry with you to Western. Maybe like we talked about in the example with the dog, like you have a career, you're one of those people like since you're 5 years old, you want to be a teacher or an engineer or a lawyer. And that's like gonna help you do well in college because like that's the reason you're going to college. That's a great thing to write about. Then they tell us why we should be excited to have you as a student. Totally okay to brag there. It's kind of what we're looking for. We'll talk a little bit about how you can express that in different types of essays in a little bit. One other common one is like I overcame some sort of adversity and that gave me perspective and skills to like keep doing well when things are hard. So like I said, we'll talk a little bit about different kinds of essays you can write. We have another question: how long would you recommend the essay to be? So it's technically we ask for no more than 500 words. I'm not going to count them if it's a little bit over 500. Not going to be held against you. Not going to be a problem. I would say like try not to go over 650 or 700. We definitely want you to like have space to be able to tell your story. But one thing that you're demonstrating in an essay too is your ability to say something meaningful within like a limited space. So if you write us like a 5-page essay, is otherwise a good essay, like, is what it is, but you're not necessarily showing us that like you can be concise and also say something meaningful in your writing. So you'll see listed 500 words. It's cool to go over that. Try not to go over like 700. Take it as an opportunity to prepare for the writing you're going to do in college, which is also going to have much stricter limits. So to answer the question you actually asked, we're looking for 500. It's okay to be a little bit over. Okay, excellent question. Please keep those coming. So yeah, 2 insider essay tips: keep it personal. Tell us why you're going to be successful. No matter what you write your essay about. If you address these 2 things, it'll be in the top 10% of essays, guaranteed. I want to tell you guys a little bit about my favorite essay that I read last year, and an example of how you can do these things. I think a lot of students kind of fall into a like, well, universities want me to write about academics or about like what a good person I am or about being the president of the chess club or whatever. And like, if that's the essay that you're excited to write, then that's the right essay for you to write. But if that's like not really what gets you going and like who you are as a person, totally okay to write about other stuff as well. My favorite essay that I read last year was a student who grew up on a farm wrote an essay about when they were younger, the cows got out and their parents weren't home. And so the student and his younger sister had to get the cows back in on their own. And it was a great essay because like it was well written and descriptive, and like they'd obviously put a lot of work and care into making it well written. But it addressed these 2 things really well as well, right? Like I got to know something about the student, like it was a big deal to them that they grew up on a farm. They said in the essay, like, I have a different background than a lot of young people, and like this is an important part of who I am. And then they also did a really good job of addressing like what this experience means to them and how to help them be successful. A Western student concluded their essay saying like, this is an example of like, I am like in a family, in a lifestyle where unexpected things happen. I have to be adaptable. I have to take on responsibility, even if I don't want it. I have to be flexible when things go wrong. And I know that those are all traits that are going to help me do well in college, because college is new and requires a lot of responsibility and things can go wrong when I don't expect it. But I know that I can handle hard situations because I did that same thing when the cows got out. Wasn't an essay about school, academics, being a really good person, anything like that. But it really stood out because the student hit these 2 points really well, right? It was personal. It addressed how they're going to be successful. So if you take anything away from our session here today, have it be this slide, have it be these 2 tips, and guaranteed it's going to be a strong essay. Okay, so now in this section, I want to talk a little bit about what are some common subjects or common types of essays that students write. So we're going to play some hits. This is a picture from Lunstock, which is a yearly like music festival on our campus in the spring to celebrate the start of spring. Hopefully we're getting back to events that look like that fairly soon. But let's play some hits. Let's talk about what are some common types of essays that students write. If we go through these 4 and you're like, none of those really speak to me, this is far from a comprehensive list. This is essentially a little bit of brainstorming where you're thinking like, okay, I can write my essay about whatever I want. What are some things that I might be able to write it about and get like a little bit of ideas brewing. So common essay topic or type number 1 is the I want to be a blank when I grow up essay. So you could be a future career, right? Like we talked about with them, I want to be a vet because I have a dog and I love my dog and I want to help take care of other dogs, right? It could be an academic passion, like maybe you don't know quite what you want to do with that, but like that you want to study marine biology and that like Western is the right place for you to do that because we're right on the water. We have an off-campus marine sciences center. That can be a great essay to write. Or it could even be as broad as a problem that you want to solve, right? Like I see these inequalities in the world. I want to do something with renewable energy. I want to help make education more equitable, like whatever that thing is for you. Even if you don't know like what major should be attached to that or what career is going to help you do that. The problem that you want to solve in the world and that being a motivation for you to go to college can be a great essay to write. So few tips on how to stand out when you're writing a I want to be blank when I grow up essay. Don't just tell us what you want to do, tell us why. And this is something that'll come up in some way, shape, or form with really any essay you write, right? So if you say, hey, I want to be a teacher and I want to go to Western to do that. That's a fine essay. Like, we've got a great teaching program, shows that you have some direction. But if you're, I want to be a teacher because, I have this class experience or I have a mentor or, it's something in my family, that sort of thing. That tells us more about you. That tells us more about your motivations. That just takes it to that next level. So, I call that the so what, right? If you're writing your essay, ask yourself, so what? That's the what, right? The what is, I want to be a teacher. So what? Why does that matter to me? Why is that the thing that I'm writing my college essay about? And make sure that you address that in your I want to be like when I grow up essay. My mother just went blank here. Shoot. Hey everyone, my Zoom just crashed. Super sorry about that. Let me know in the chat if you can still see or hear me okay. And we will get back started. So hopefully everyone is still with us. And we will move forward from here. All good now. Thank you. Appreciate you all hanging with me. You think at this point we'd all know how to use Zoom, but my computer just said, no way, it's a Saturday. Okay, so we talked about the so what, right? Like, tell us why this is significant to you and why this is the thing you're writing your college essay about. If it's applicable, tell us why Western is the right place for you to do this. We're not looking for you to like blindly praise us, but like if you've done your research and you know that like we have the oldest environmental college in the country, or 1 in 5 teachers in the state of Washington are graduates of Western, or we have our off-campus Marine Sciences Center. This shows that like you know your stuff. This shows that you don't just know what you want to study, but you know that this is the right place for you to study that. That's a good sign that someone's going to be successful in college, right? So if it's applicable, let us know why Western is the place for you to pursue this passion or solve this problem that is the thing you're going to college for. And finally, we mentioned that this is important in any essay, but I think this is the hardest type of essay that we're going to talk about to make that connection of like, this is what will make me successful in college. Doesn't have to be any big thing. I mentioned it before, like, if your future career, academic passion, or problem you want to solve in the world is the thing that like you want to go to college for, that's kind of in and of itself a way to show that you're going to be successful, right? Just saying something like, hey, I want to be a teacher. That's going to motivate me to do well in college. Boom, that's covered. But that takes your essay from good to great, just being able to connect those dots. We have a question, will this recording be available to us later? It will be, yeah. So don't worry about like jotting down every detail or anything like that. You'll have access to the recording. Okay, so that is common broad category of essay number 1. Common broad category of essay number 2 is the I overcame adversity essay. This is really broad. It can be a sports injury. It can be a hard home situation, trouble with a teacher. I suspect I'm going to be reading a lot of essays this year about COVID-19 and the impact on student schooling, and that's totally fine. Don't worry about like writing an essay that you think a lot of students are going to write. Like, you'll still make it your own. It'll still be your essay. So this is a pretty common genre of essay to write about. The way that you can take it from a good essay to a great essay, few things. If applicable, definitely share with us how it's going to impact other stuff that we'll see. So like if you were writing your essay about like, you got really sick and missed a bunch of school, let us know when that was. Let us know that like, hey, I missed my finals. So like sophomore years, my grades are going to be really down in the dumps. Or if you're writing your essay about like you had a hard home situation and like you weren't getting your schoolwork done for a while because you had real life going on, let us know when that was. Let us know how that impacted your academics. We pay a lot of attention to the context that you provide for anything that happens academically that we're going to see, particularly on your transcript. And we're not going to hold that sort of thing against you. Like if your grades suffered because there was a pandemic and it was hard for you to be a student for a while, we're not going to hold that against you. But if you don't share that context with us of like, this is how it impacted me, and this is what you're going to see on my transcripts, we don't have that context unless you provide it. So, we had the question before of like, how much is too much information? And that's where we get to that, like, there really is no too much information on our end. Share what you're comfortable sharing, but know that the more context you can provide, the more fairly we are going to be able to evaluate your application. Also, if applicable, and this is not going to be applicable for a lot of these types of essays, but if it is applicable, own up to any mistakes that you have made, right? Obviously, we're not gonna look for you to like take blame for being in a car crash or there being a pandemic or like your parents getting divorced or anything like that. But if you write your essay about like a hard situation you had like with a teacher, for example, even if it was like 90% their fault, let us know about the 10% that's your fault. It's honestly really impressive to see a student write in an essay and say like, hey, this is something that like I screwed up. I did a bad job and like I'm gonna do better next time this sort of thing comes up. It's also very impressive to see adults do that because adults don't do that very much. So yeah, if it's applicable, if there's something in your essay where you're like, hey, I didn't work hard in school and like my grades kind of sucked for a while, but now I'm taking this seriously, just own up to it. And honestly, it's gonna come across really well to us. And then last point, already kind of covered it. Share as much as you're comfortable with. There's no such thing as too much information on our end. So this is the I overcame adversity essay. The broad common thing to write about an essay about number 3 is the I did a thing essay. So if you remember back from when we started the presentation, we talked about like, what are we looking for? We're looking for accomplishments, contributions to community, diverse experiences. This is an area that can really come across in your application. This is for anything, any awards, recognitions, accomplishments. Maybe you went on like a long backpacking trip. Maybe you went on a mission trip with your church group. Maybe you volunteer in your community. This is the essay where you tell us something that you did. And so how do you stand out? Remember when we talked before about we don't want your essay to just repeat what we've already seen elsewhere in the application? Make sure that you're doing that here as well. So maybe you have on your, listed on your activities list that you were a state champion cross-country runner, right? Totally fine to repeat that part of it in the essay, but don't just tell us like, hey, I was a state champion. I was the best in Washington or the best in Alaska or wherever. Tell us how you did it. Tell us what that training was like. Did you have to sacrifice to do that? How did you balance being a student with being a high-level athlete, right? How did you do it? And then also don't remember the so what that we talked about before, right? You were a cross-country state champion, and are you going to take that dedication and bring it with you to college? And that's going to help you do well in the classroom. Are you going to take that experience of balancing being a student and being an athlete and know that you're going to be able to be more than one thing when you're in college? Like maybe it's something else, right? But tell us why it matters. So what did you do? How did you do it? Why does it matter? Next bullet point, kind of repeating the why does it matter? Like what are you going to take away from that experience, right? It's one thing to tell us what you did, but tell us like why it matters moving forward into college. And then I mentioned before, brag a little bit, like not the place to be modest. We want to see the best sides of you. I think we often, just like in general in the world, tell young people that they shouldn't brag about themselves. And maybe it's good to have some restraint and modesty as a virtue, but this is a place to brag, so please brag. Talk yourself up a little bit. Broad category of essay number 4 is the This Is Who I Am essay. This is a pretty common one. This is where you write about aspects of yourself that are important to you that you want to share with us. It could be cultural identity, religious identity, another social identity, membership in like the LGBT community, anything like that, racial identity, ethnicity, gender identity, or your values, something important about your family, something else about your community that's not listed on there. But this is essentially the essay that says like, this is an important part of who I am, and I want to share that with you. Question from Justin, will the essay be weighted more because students won't be submitting SAT and ACT scores? That's a hard question, like a little bit, yes and no. We don't have like a rubric that we use that we're assigning like point values or anything like that to. But I guess in the sense of like most students are not gonna have an SAT or an ACT score, I guess like every other piece of the application does become a little bit more weighted because we are evaluating your application with less information than we would normally have. So it's not weighted more in like a formal way of like, oh, it was worth 50 points and now it's worth 60, because that's not how the application process works. But it is part of, was essentially a smaller application. So it does fill a bigger role there. I'm not sure if that answers your question. I hope it does. It's kind of a tricky one to answer because there's not like a good codified answer for that. But yeah, it will end up mattering a little bit more than in a normal year, just because there's less information on the rest of your application. So yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that. Do essay prompts change every school year? They don't here. Honestly, I think these are the same essay prompts that I was responding to when I applied to Western. I graduated from high school in 2009. So we've had these prompts for a while. Like, they certainly could change. But if you're a junior or a sophomore right now, or you have friends or siblings who are younger, who you're going to tell about here, in my experience, they've been pretty consistent over the years. This is certainly subject to change, but they're broad enough that I don't see any big sweeping changes through the years. Good question, Julia. Okay. Speaking of This Is Who I Am essay, how do we write an essay like this? We talked before about like, it is important to be very authentically you and to use your own voice in your essay, no matter what your essay topic is. But I think it's especially more important, in a This Is Who I Am essay, because if you are writing about your future career as an astronaut, or about the time that you were a state champion wrestler, or something like that, where like you are the star of the show, but there's also something else going on. In a This Is Who I Am essay, it is 100% about you. Like, you are protagonist in a one-person show, right? So it's even more important to be very authentically yourself. I think if you are the type of student who is writing a This Is Who I Am essay, it probably comes a little bit more naturally to like be using your own authentic voice, but just something important to keep in mind. Because like, if you're writing about yourself, like, let's make sure that it's like really 100% about ourselves. Another way to stand out in this sort of essay is you can tell us about, how do you see your community represented at Western? Like, maybe you're saying like, hey, like, I'm really excited about the Queer Resources Center because I'm excited to see my community here at Western. Or it might be the case where you say like, hey, to be honest, like, I don't see a lot of people like me represented at Western, and I'm looking forward to building a community from the ground up, because this is something I care about, right? So you don't necessarily have to like name drop a club that you're interested in or anything like that. But, if you see yourself at Western, if you don't see yourself at Western, if you have an idea of like how you would like to see yourself at Western, it'd be a great thing to include in there. And also one important thing to keep in mind, not necessarily going to apply for everyone who writes this sort of essay. We have a scholarship program called the Multicultural Achievement Program. And that's a scholarship specifically for students who are involved in like activities related to diversity and multiculturalism in their own communities. And so what I mean by in their own communities is like, if you study abroad in Japan and like have a really cool multicultural experience, great thing to write an essay about, but not necessarily like what that specific scholarship program is looking for. But if you are involved in like cultural activities in your community or in your school, whether it's like as a volunteer or if it's like part of your own cultural heritage, anything like that, keep that like in my community part in mind, because that's something that is attached to a pretty cool scholarship program. We have a question in the chat. Would it be better to stick to the other given prompts more than the topic of your own choice? It's funny. I have a cousin who's 18 and applying for college, and he called me about an hour ago and asked like the exact same question about some schools that he was looking at. Of is it better to use the preset prompts or better to write my own prompt? And it's a hard question for me to answer, because I guess no, it is not better to use the prompts that we have written. That is not a better option than coming up with your own prompt. What really matters is that it's the story about yourself that matters to you, right? That's the way that you can express who you are as a person and what's gonna make you successful in college. If the right way to express that is through one of the pre-written prompts, then that's the right prompt for you. But if it's not. A majority of students do the topic of your choice prompt. So that is a pretty popular option. You're not more likely to be admitted or more likely to get scholarships based on the prompt you choose. So it's hard for me to answer that question, because like that is going to be pretty much 100% dependent on like who you are and what is the story that like it makes sense for you to tell. Like your essay is going to look different than your best friend's essay and your sibling's essay and your classmates' essays. It is like a very personal thing. So it's not better to use the pre-written prompts. It's also not worse to use them. It's just a matter of like what makes sense to you and what's going to help you write the essay that hits what we're looking for and what makes a strong essay. So these are some common essay topics to write about. Like I said before, if you see these 4 things and you're like, I don't really want to write any of those 4 essays, that is far from exhaustive. One thing I want to share with you all now, because we do have a little bit of time, is I want to share an actual essay from a student who applied to Western. I'm not totally sure when, probably around 2013 or 2014, long enough that it's not going to be someone that you all know. So let me do the screen share again here. Okay, you guys see the essay up on there? And I'm just gonna read it out loud. I know like you all are capable of reading it, but just for the sake of like us all reading the essay at the same time. And then we can talk about like what's well done in this essay and what isn't well done. And do certainly feel free, like if you have any insight on this essay, like while I'm reading it, share that in the chat and we can talk about that. So this essay, my passion for environmental conservation began when one of my classes went over food waste in America. One movie we watched documented the results of a 6-month experiment where a couple only ate from dumpsters behind grocery stores to show how much excess food waste we were producing. They had so much food to choose from that they didn't have enough space for all of it. Between plastic waste, landfills, food waste, and other man-made environmental disasters, it quickly became a goal of mine to help tackle this issue. While learning about these atrocities, I began to focus on developing countries still in the beginning stages of industrialization that have a better chance to save their environment from the start. When I was 8, my father went to Sierra Leone, Africa, as part of a missions team. Once he returned, he could not stop talking about how humbling it was to experience the difference in societies and how it changed his perspective to see what he had been taking advantage of. Clean water, a full stomach, bathrooms, beds, etc., most of which many people could not imagine living without. Sierra Leone is just one of the several developing countries I wish to help. If I can make any kind of difference, no matter how small, I will know that I have succeeded. As an employee in the food business, I have been able to witness firsthand the amount of food waste that takes place. We have made progress toward reducing waste, such as donating to food banks, reducing prices on older products, and offering imperfect produce rather than disposing of perfectly healthy produce. Even with all of these great advancements, we still end up throwing away perfectly good food as a result of no other alternative. I know we can do more. I'm offering fresh eyes to pull our society out of the rut we have fallen into. It can be really difficult in this day and age to be optimistic about the future. I am human. I make mistakes. I have doubts. I have fears. And even through all that, I am optimistic that we can change the direction we are going and save what is left for generations to come. In order for me to help when I join this fight, I need your help first. With a degree in environmental science and conservation, I wholeheartedly believe we can change the future together. So feel free, any like reactions to that. This was, like I said, this was a student who got into Western. The student got a pretty good scholarship based on their non-academic information, so including this essay. And we can just kind of walk through paragraph by paragraph if nobody has like immediate reactions to it. So what kind of essay is this, right? Is this one of the 4 types of essays we talked about? This is very much a I want to be blank when I grow up essay. And I think this is a cool example of that because this isn't a student who like knows they want to be a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer, an admissions counselor, but this is a student who knows that there's a problem that they want to help solve in their community and in the world at large. Really strong introduction. From reading the first sentence, my passion for environmental conservation began when one of my classes went over food waste in America. As the reader, I immediately know what this essay is going to be about, and that's a really good thing. So it's a very strong introduction. The student incorporates a lot of personal experience into this. Between that first paragraph and particularly the third paragraph, where they talk about their experiences working in the food industry, we're getting a lot of information about the student. We're not just seeing what their passion is, but where it came from and why it matters to them. And this is a good example of, this student put in their activities list that they worked at a restaurant, right? And so if they had just repeated, I work at a restaurant, that wouldn't have been a good use of the essay, but that they were able to expand on that, right? You know, I work in a restaurant and this is how it connects to like what I'm going to college for. That's a really strong thing. Bouncing back up to the second paragraph here, you know, the student talking about their father spending time in Sierra Leone and the experiences that their father had, and like bringing it back and sharing it with the student. That's a really well done example of like, that is something very personal and something personally meaningful to the student, even though it's something that they didn't do, that somebody else did. You know, and so if they had spent this paragraph talking about their father's experience and time spent in Africa and what he did, again, that wouldn't have been a very good use of that space because we wouldn't be learning about the student from that. But the fact they said, you know, my dad did this was his experience, this is what he told me about how he felt, and this is how like I have internalized it. And again, always looking ahead to how I'm going to be successful at college. This is part of why like this is an important field for me. This is why this is an important issue for me and a problem that I want to solve. So that is really well done. I would say kind of the only thing that's missing from this essay, if y'all remember when we talked about the this is what I want to do when I grow up genre of essay, I mentioned that the hardest connection to make in this type of essay is this is why it's going to make me successful at Western connection. That ended up not being a huge deal for the student because like I mentioned, this is a really well-written essay in pretty much all other regards. But if I were giving them feedback, like if they were asking me about their essay before they'd sent it in, I would say, hey, you know, add something in there, connect it to Western, tell us how that's going to make you successful. It's important for us to see that like you are connecting those dots as well as like letting us know that those dots are there to be connected, if that makes sense. So really strong essay. The like introspection is very good. Being able to say, these are the experience I've had and this is why it matters is phenomenal. And it's like a pretty small nitpicky thing for me to say like, and then connect it to college because otherwise a really strong essay. Question from Aurora. I noticed they don't have indexed paragraphs. Does the format matter? Format matters in the sense of like, use paragraphs, like make the paragraphs appropriate. The reason that there's no indents on the paragraphs here is that's just like a formatting quirk when you copy paste it into the box that the essays go into. So actually all essays look like this with the line break between paragraphs rather than them being indented. And so that part doesn't matter. The format does matter in the sense of like, don't just have it one big block of text. Make sure there are paragraphs. And I should say, when we talk about things like formatting, I should have mentioned this earlier when we were talking about spelling, proofreading, putting the right name of the school, formatting paragraphs, things like that. You will not be denied from Western because of like one misplaced comma or one spelling mistake. You won't be denied from Western because you put the name of the wrong school into your essay. But why stuff like this matters is the overall presentation does make a difference. So if there's one thing, not a big deal, like we all make mistakes. But if there's like no capital letters and repeated misspellings and like bad paragraph formatting, it does show a certain level of like, you know, whether or not it's actually the case, what it indicates to the reader is that the writer didn't put a lot of time or effort or thought into the essay and into the application. So while one error in and of itself isn't going to make a difference, the overall presentation, like the presence of multiple consistent errors, you know, does, you know, fairly or not, whether or not it's actually an accurate reflection of reality, does say something about the amount of care and effort that's been put into the essay. And then of course, another thing is like, show us you can write to a level that you're gonna do well in your college classes. Any tips on how not to be wordy, including extra words that don't need to be there? That's a really good question. I really like that. Part of that is gonna be a matter of having somebody else read over your work, you know, because something's gonna be pretty clear to you if you wrote it. So, you know, ask your friend, ask your parent, ask your teacher, like, hey, is this wordy? Hey, does this make sense? Part of that too is like going back to using your own voice. Like, I'm glad I don't have access to the essay that I wrote for college anymore. The computer that I wrote it on like exploded and went belly up. I know for a fact that I tried to come off sounding like I'd memorized the thesaurus in the dictionary. Don't do that. Use your voice. Like, don't make it so informal that like it's not, you know, academic, but you know, don't feel like there's pressure to use a bunch of like SAT vocab words. And then finally, in terms of not being wordy, just like general writing tips, oftentimes adverbs, adjectives, words like very are like not necessarily things that should be as ever present in writing as they often are. Using strong adjectives for emphasis is like an important part of being a descriptive writer. But if like every single noun in your essay has like some big adjective like catastrophic or wonderful or something like that attached to it, it kind of like takes the wind out of the sails there. So yeah, I hope that helps with the question. Like, ask someone else to read it over. Focus on using your own voice. We don't care if you have a bunch of like multi-syllabic impressive sounding words in the essay. That's not really what we're looking for. And then, be judicious with your adjectives and adverbs, which I think is good writing in general. Yeah, really, really good questions. Feel free to share any more in there that you do have. That's kind of all the feedback that I wanted to share with you guys about this essay. Like I said, this was a really good essay. This was a really successful student. Like, it wasn't a perfect essay. I don't think I've ever read a perfect essay, and I've read thousands of these. But it's evident that the student put a lot of time and effort and care into their essay, and it ended up paying off for them. So definitely feel free to continue with any questions that you do have about that essay. I do want to jump back to what we were looking at before on the slideshow here. If I can find that, I sure can. Last thing that I want to leave you all with, we'll get the screen share popped up here again, is one thing that we offer, all of us admissions counselors, so you can see here, myself, Jacob, Julia, Marshana, Tina, and Freddie, is that we are happy to give you feedback on your essay before you submit it. I will ask that like you don't, each and every one of you, send it to me. We are admissions counselors. You'll be assigned them like based on your geography, right? Like I mentioned, I do Alaska, Southwest Washington, and Oregon. So check out the link on the bottom of the page there. Bookmark that, see who your admissions counselor is. That's going to be the person who's working most closely with your application and with your essay. And you can email that person a draft of your essay and say like, hey, do you have any feedback? Like, this is what I was trying to do. So when I talk about like, let somebody else read your essay before you submit it, I can do that, or Jacob can do that, or Julia can do that, or whoever your admissions counselor is. Two caveats with that. We're not going to do a like point-by-point grammar check. If you submit an essay to me and there's like some grammar stuff going on, I might say like, hey, review like comma use with someone, like see if you can touch that up, or I might say, hey, like you didn't capitalize anything. But I'm not going to go through with a red pen and mark each example of that. And let's see, the second thing, and then I'll get to Justin's question in just a sec. Second thing with that is the application deadline to Western is January 31st. We get about a third of our applications the week before the application deadline. So if you are reaching out to your admissions counselor like a week or two before the application is due, they're not necessarily going to be able to give you as much time or as much feedback, and then you won't have as much time on your end to apply that feedback. So if you are looking to, have one of the professionals look over your essay and give you feedback, which is a really, really good thing to be doing, just try to be getting on it, a little bit earlier in the process. Like the fact that you are all here and like going to a session like this on a Saturday about writing a college essay makes me think that a lot of you are the type of student who is going to be applying early anyway. And so just keep that in mind, like give us enough time to give a fair look at your essay and to give you the feedback that you need. So yeah, we're happy to look at your essay. We encourage any of you who have an essay you're working on and think you'd benefit from feedback to reach out to whoever your counselor is. Justin has a really good question. Is there a good place you recommend we go and read successful essays? Man, that is a really good question. I don't have a good answer off the top of my head. Man, your English teacher at school may have some examples of that. So if you reach out to someone else and you're not able to figure that out, feel free to shoot me an email. I happy to look into that, because that's a really good question, and one that I wish I had an answer to. So I can look into some resources and let you know where might be a good place to go for that. So yeah, I'm sorry I don't have a more satisfying answer to that. That's a really good question. Question from Sydney. Who/how many people consider your application and decide whether or not to admit you? It depends a little bit. Nothing is done solely by one person. It'll always be multiple people, whether it's admitting you or denying you. If a student is denied from Western, pretty much the entire office will have seen their application. If we are admitting a student and we're like pretty sure about them and like we think they're great, it's not necessarily going to go through all 6 of the people on the screen here. This is the majority of the admissions committee. Not every single one of us reads every single application. But if a student is denied, it goes through a bunch of people. So there's not like, really anywhere between like 2 to 7 or 8 people, depending on the application. But just know that nothing is ever going to be done solely with myself. When I receive your application, it's been through someone else, and then I do sort of the lion's share of the evaluation process, and then it'll go off to someone else after me in most cases. Yeah, great questions. That's the end of the presentation that I have. I will stay on here and hang out for a few more minutes if anyone does have any other questions. I do want to leave you all, and if any of you have like been to a presentation I did before, you may have heard this before. But the feedback that I want to leave you all with as you're in your senior year applying for college is that applying for college is going to be hard. And I see your question in the chat. I'll get to that right after I give you this sort of little tidbit. Applying to college is hard for most students because it's a big decision, and it's okay. Big decisions are hard. You might find it super easy, but you would not be in the majority there. If you find applying to college to be hard because it's confusing or unclear, particularly in the context of this essay, if you're sitting down and you realize you don't know what we want from you in an essay, you don't know what the expectation on yourself is, that's a situation where I'd really encourage you to reach out to the admissions office, to myself, or someone else, because it's hard because it's a big decision. That's fine. If it's hard because it's confusing and we haven't explained what we want from you, then I would want you to reach out and get more info. So I think you've probably seen I'm a pretty open book. I'm happy to tell you whatever it is you need to know. We have some people rolling out. Thank you so much, everyone who's here, for coming and for sharing your questions. I really appreciate it. Question from Catherine, they said I was going to get to. In general, should the topic of our essay adhere to which programs or majors we want to go to at the university? No, we don't really take that into account. Even if you're pretty sure you want to major in, we're giving you the benefit of the doubt being 17 or 18 years old and not holding you to that. The only time that is going to matter is if you end up going elsewhere, if you go to community college for 2 years and then apply to Western as a transfer student. For a transfer student, we do want to see a little bit more of a connection to the academic major. But even if you're a student who's in Running Start right now, is going to graduate high school with your associate's degree, we still get that you're 18 and you don't necessarily know what you want to do, or even if you do, we don't want to hold you to that. So if that's the right essay for you to write, if you're stoked on being a doctor and you're going to go pre-med at Western, by all means write that, but don't feel the pressure for your essay to connect to your academic interest. It can, but it's certainly not a requirement. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Like I said, I'll sit here and answer any more questions, but we've got some people rolling out. And have a great rest of your weekend. Thank you for being here. And I hope you enjoy the rest of this program today as well. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Y'all have a nice day. Oh, good question, Catherine. Can you combine 2 prompts? Absolutely, yeah. Question from Jack, where can we find the recording later on? It'll be posted on the Virtual Fall Preview Day website. This is the website for this program, where you got to this recording from. If you have trouble finding it on there, shoot me an email and I'll send it to you. You got it.